All right, let's talk about one of the most unbelievable financial schemes you've probably never even heard of. It's a story about a government process that sounds super boring. It's called the dollar auction, but it was actually a secret pipeline. A pipeline that funneled billions of dollars from the U.S. Federal Reserve straight to some of America's worst enemies.
So our story really kicks off in January of 2024. A drone, which was launched by an Iran-backed militia, hits a U.S. base in Jordan. 3 American soldiers were killed. It was a really shocking attack, and it demanded a response. But where the investigation led, well, nobody saw that coming.
Because it led to an Iraqi bank, and then, incredibly, all the way back to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So you gotta be asking, how on earth is a major U.S. financial institution connected to a deadly attack on U.S. soldiers? Okay, let's get into it.
Right after the attack, the U.S. response wasn't just military, it was financial. Washington pointed its finger directly at an Iraqi institution, a place called Al-Huda Bank, and its owner. The Treasury Department hit them with sanctions. And the reason? Money laundering for terrorist groups. Specifically, they named Kataib Hezbollah, the exact same militia that claimed it was behind that fatal drone strike. The connection was just right there in black and white. This bank was helping wash money for the people who killed American soldiers.
But here is the part that is just absolutely mind-blowing. This wasn't some big secret that U.S. officials had just uncovered. Nope. A detailed public warning about this exact bank, Al-Huda, and its massive fraud scheme was put out by Iraqi investigators almost 10 years before that attack even happened.
So how did they do it? I mean, how did this whole scam work? To really get it, we have to understand the tool they used, something called the Iraqi dollar auction.
You know, the idea behind it was actually pretty straightforward. After the 2003 invasion, the U.S. set this system up with a simple goal in mind. Iraq makes billions from selling oil, right? And that money, which is in U.S. dollars, needed to be used to buy things the country desperately needed. You know, food, medicine, equipment. The dollar auction was supposed to be the bridge to make all that happen smoothly.
On paper, it was designed to be pretty simple. So, step 1, Iraq's oil money gets deposited into an account at the New York Fed. Step 2, Iraq's central bank holds a daily auction for those dollars. Step 3, Iraqi banks, acting for local companies, bid for those dollars to pay for stuff they're importing. And finally, step 4, the Fed wires the money to pay the exporter. In theory, it's clean, simple, and makes perfect sense.
But that theory? Well, it fell apart completely in the real world. You see, the system had this fatal flaw, and it turned it from a tool for rebuilding a country into a literal cash machine for criminals.
Let's make this real. We'll look at a specific case that investigators uncovered. An Iraqi company applied for $24 million. They said it was to import a huge shipment of steel and air conditioners from a company in the United Arab Emirates. Everything looked legit at first glance.
So the application claimed the exporter was a real company in the UAE. The reality? That company was a ghost. It didn't exist. They claimed to have documents proving the goods were imported. The reality? Key customs forms were completely missing. And they claimed the money was going to the exporter. The reality? Millions were wired straight to the bank's own chairman and his brother. It was a total phantom transaction.
So how widespread was this? Well, get this. Investigators took a look at just one bank's applications for a single month. They found that over 99%, of the money they asked for showed clear evidence of fraud. This wasn't a case of a few bad apples. The entire orchard was rotten. So, where did all this stolen money actually go? It wasn't just lining the pockets of some corrupt bankers. It was flowing directly into the hands of groups that are actively working against the United States. And the list of who got paid is just grim. The dollars that were siphoned out of this auction have been traced to Iran-backed militias, just like the one that killed those 3 soldiers. The money funded ISIS, it helped prop up the brutal Assad regime in Syria, it even reached a known financier for the Houthi rebels in Yemen. A system that was set up by the U.S. was literally being used to arm and fund its own enemies. And that brings us to the most frustrating question in all of this. If officials knew this was going on for years, years, why did it take the deaths of American soldiers for anyone to finally take action against even one of these banks? Just look at this timeline. It's staggering. In 2012, a U.S. government watchdog tells Congress about massive abuse of the auction. In 2015, an Iraqi investigation publicly names Al-Huda Bank and its $6.5 billion scheme. And yet, the actual sanctions don't happen until 2024, after American lives are lost.
That's a 12-year gap between the first official alarm bell and a real consequence. So why the delay? Well, officials have given a whole bunch of reasons. The U.S. was focused on the war against ISIS, they didn't want to rock the boat. Some were worried that cracking down would mess up Iraq's currency. One former Iraqi finance minister even said some U.S. officials had a kind of boys will be boys attitude about the whole thing. And at first, some people just figured, well, it's Iraqi money, Iraqi law, so the U.S. couldn't do anything about it.
But as investigators kept digging, a much more disturbing picture started to come out. This wasn't just a case of looking the other way. It was really a failure to take any responsibility for a deeply flawed system that the U.S. had built itself.
The former Iraqi finance minister, Ali Alawi, he put it pretty bluntly. He said the system was never fixed because it was a huge cash cow. Too many powerful people were getting way too rich. The motivation to cheat was just so much bigger than the motivation to be honest.
But this quote, this one from Stuart Bowen, the former U.S. Inspector General for Iraq, this really gets to the heart of it. He said, "We created the monster," and then said, "Not our monster." That is just a stunning admission of a complete failure of American oversight.
And that's really the bottom line here. The U.S. created this complex financial system with, as Bowen said, minimal guidance. Handed over the keys, and then for almost 20 years did nothing effective to stop it from being hijacked by criminals, by militias, and by terrorists.
Which leaves us with a really unsettling final thought. So the U.S. has sanctioned a couple of banks, but the fundamental system, the dollar auction itself, is still there. The monster was created by a flawed system, and if that system isn't truly reformed, what's to stop this from happening all over again?